What's the worst punishment ever? These ancient methods come close. Crushing by elephants was a brutal execution most associated with ancient and medieval India, used on traitors, rebels, and high-profile criminals. It also appeared in Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Carthage. Executions were public spectacles meant to terrify. Sometimes the elephant crushed the head or chest instantly, but in other cases it was trained to prolong agony, tearing limbs or slowly crushing the body before the final blow. Keel hauling was a brutal maritime punishment used to enforce discipline at sea. Victims were tied with ropes, thrown overboard, and dragged beneath the sharp barnacle-covered hull. The jagged growths could shred skin, and many drowned before resurfacing. European navies, especially Dutch and French, used it, and pirates occasionally adopted it for mutiny, theft, or desertion. Severe injuries could include lost limbs or decapitation, making it both lethal and terrifying to witnesses. Flaying, the removal of a person's skin, was used throughout history as a gruesome punishment. In Mesopotamia, Assyrian kings boasted of flaying rebellious nobles and displaying their skins. Flaying also appeared among the Aztecs, medieval Europeans, and some Asian societies, usually reserved for traitors or enemies of the state. The punishment killed slowly and delivered a horrifying public warning. Cutting off noses, ears, or lips has been used worldwide to permanently disfigure and shame criminals. Crimes included corruption, theft, treason, or adultery. In medieval Europe, ears were often cut off for repeat offenders. In the Middle East and South Asia, nose-cutting punished adultery or betrayal. Some rulers removed the body parts of rivals to humiliate them and block positions of power. These punishments left a lifelong, visible mark of disgrace. Aztec ritual sacrifice often targeted criminals, especially those offending the gods, like stealing sacred items. Public executions involved tying the condemned to ceremonial stones and removing the heart while it was still beating. The act was both a form of punishment and a sacred ritual meant to nourish the gods, making it a particularly gruesome and public method of execution. Poena culae was a Roman execution for parricides. The condemned were sewn into a sack with animals, often a snake, dog, monkey, and rooster, and thrown into water. Inside, the victim struggled against drowning and attacks from the animals. Death came from both suffocation and brutal injuries inflicted by the panicked creatures, making it one of Rome's most horrifying punishments. Impalement was one of the most gruesome executions ever devised. The victim was pierced on a long stake and left suspended in public as a terrifying warning. Executioners would sometimes avoid vital organs to keep the victim alive for as long as possible, turning death into a slow, agonizing ordeal that could last hours or even days. As the body's weight dragged it further down the stake, internal damage, blood loss, and shock would gradually finish what the executioner had started. It was designed not just to kill, but to horrify anyone. Branding has been used globally to mark slaves, criminals, or outcasts. In the ancient world, slaves were branded with letters or symbols to prevent escape. In Rome, criminals or runaway slaves were burned with hot irons on the forehead. Medieval Europe used branding for theft, blasphemy, or desertion, while parts of Asia used it to signify loyalty or service. The marks were permanent, highly visible, and publicly humiliating. Drowning has served as a lethal punishment for serious crimes like treason, sacrilege, or witchcraft. Victims were thrown into rivers, lakes, or the sea, left to suffocate and struggle. From ancient Egypt to medieval Europe, it was both a method of execution and a public warning, with death often slow and terrifying. Amputation has been used worldwide as a harsh, permanent punishment for theft, violent crimes, or betrayal. Hands, feet, or limbs were removed to prevent reoffending and serve as visible warnings. In medieval Europe or the Middle East, thieves often lost a hand, while violent criminals faced more severe amputations. Severity depended on social status or local custom, but the goal was always clear: permanent physical punishment and a public mark of guilt. One of the most horrifying punishments recorded in history was scaphism, or the boats. Used in ancient Persia, the victim was trapped between two hollowed canoes, smeared with milk and honey, and left in a swamp to be eaten alive by insects over the course of days or even weeks. Reserved for the most serious crimes, it inflicted extreme physical and psychological torment. While rare and only described in a handful of accounts, its sheer cruelty has made it infamous. Thanks for watching.